Greetings, everyone, and welcome again today, Friday, June 19th, to IPM's weekly virtual forum. IPM Responds is the hashtag. IPM Responds to the COVID-19 pandemic and the spread of the novel coronavirus, which unfortunately, as some of us have been discussing on Zoom, seems to be picking up throughout the United States. I know that counties around Cincinnati and Dayton in Southern Ohio are experiencing a pretty radical uptick. Maine is now listed as a new potential hotspot with summer travelers coming here, and we have people on the call from Michigan and Illinois, other California, deeply impacted states, and obviously our partners and friends, particularly in India, where the pandemic and the response to the pandemic, particularly the closing of markets and such, is really impacting the poorest of the poor and the most marginalized communities with whom we work. I would be remiss today not to point out two things as we get going. The first, as many of you know, or increasingly are learning about, myself included, today is the commemoration known as Juneteenth, when we commemorate the date on June 19th, 1865, when the last formerly enslaved people in Texas were freed. And it's a long and complicated story. I've posted some really powerful links, particularly a wonderful article from Henry Louis Gates, the Harvard professor and well-known PBS commentator, on the IPM Facebook page that you could check out if you're interested in learning more. And that has some other interesting links embedded within that posting. This weekend, we will also, in fact, yesterday, some people in El Salvador, and this Sunday in the United States will be celebrating Father's Day, and a special E-Connections is going out later today in recognition of all those fathers within the IPM family who have had such a remarkable impact on our work over the years. And I want to remember especially today our founding fathers, if you will, Jim Mayer and Paul Strage, and the fathers of both of our speakers today, Himmat's father, who inspired his work after his martyrdom in Golana for his remarkable efforts organizing and working alongside the Dalit community there in Golana in the Gujarat state in India, and also Mahesh, who lost his father. I was actually there with him along with Peter Mayer, who's not able to join us today at that time. And I know many on the call, many at home, Fatima Pakas, my spouse Aline, many of us are mourning the recent passing of fathers, and just want to take a moment to acknowledge that and remember them and note that the work we do is in their memory. I'll remind those of you that are on Zoom that this is being streamed live on Facebook as well. So you're being seen internationally, literally. So just to be aware of that as you step on and off the camera or indulge in a little lunch, and also to mute yourselves. So you can always listen while muted and without the video if you need to step away for a moment. But we're really honored today to continue this series really with a redo, if you will, of a forum that we scheduled over a month ago, and we had some connectivity issues. We're hoping today it'll go better. We have a PowerPoint presentation that Ilsa will be walking us through that was prepared by Himmat with Mahesh. And I'd like to say about Himmat, to be very clear, that he is the first first fellow, actually, that IPM has ever had, coming out of our 40th anniversary General Assembly in Cleveland, Ohio. We identified having regional fellows as a real priority for us to acknowledge the remarkable work that so many people do around the world, and wanting to support them in their efforts and partner with them where possible and appropriate. So Himmat is a regional fellow. He is also the director or coordinator of the Pochabhai Foundation, and we'll be hearing more about his work, his remarkable work really with that foundation that I've had the opportunity, and I know many of you on the call and Facebook have had the opportunity to visit with recently. And I want to acknowledge my Yale Divinity School students who traveled with me to be with Himmat and Mahesh and others there just a few years ago. And many of them I know expressed their sadness that they wouldn't be able to join us at this time because of their own involvement with Juneteenth activities today, but we'll check it out on Facebook later. So Himmat is just a remarkable man, a father, a spouse, a son. Those of you who have met him know exactly what I mean. He spent much time in Cleveland with us over the years, getting to know many of our donors and friends there, and it's really a privilege to be able to have him with us today. And he's joined by Mahesh Upadhyaya, who's also a father, as well as a son and a spouse, and a surrogate dad for probably more people than he would like to admit. And one of the real inspirations in my work with IPM, and a partner now going back to our first trip together, our first time together in South India, gosh, almost 2 decades ago. So I want to acknowledge Mahesh as our regional director, and Himmat again as our regional fellow, who will be leading us through this conversation today with the hashtag IPM Responds, as we hear about the work of the Pochabhai Foundation in Golana, India, and the wider COVID-19 and novel coronavirus impact in that part of the world. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Himmat and Mahesh, and remind you again that we are streaming live on Facebook, so please mute yourself if you're not in the conversation, and feel free to either note comments in the chat function here or on Facebook, and we'll follow up during our question and answer period. Thank you all for joining us. Himmat?
Yes, Joe.
Okay.
So thank you, Joe.
Yes.
So good morning, all of you. My name is Himmat, and I am a international fellow. So thanks to Joe for giving this opportunity. So welcome to Pochabhai Foundation. Next.
Next slide, please.
Introduction about Bhal and Golana. So Golana comes under Khambhat Taluka of Anand district, Gujarat state. It is located near coastal area of Arabian Sea on his right, and Sabarmati river on its left side. Bhal is situated at the end periphery of Anand district. Agriculture is main occupation of this area. Agriculture totally dependent on rainwater only, because there is no irrigation facility and groundwater is very much saline. Next slide, please. This is map Khambhat Taluka, and where we work in Khambhat and Tarapur Taluka. So please you see that map. Next slide, please. Socio-economic condition of people. Bhal compulsory. Bhal comprise of Darbars, Koli Patels, Bharwad, Wagris, Safai Kamdar, and Dalit communities mainly. Darbar are the landlord and rich community, so they dominate the society. Koli Patel do agriculture and labor work. Many of them are also economically poor. Bharwad do animal husbandry work with low income. Wagris do fishing as well as labor work. And Safai Kamdar and Dalit mainly dependent on agriculture labor work. They have less land or no land holding. They have to go for labor work in the farms of Darbar community. Next slide, please. Socio-economic condition of Dalits. Dalits are the most vulnerable group of people in this area. They are economically very poor. The main occupation of Dalits is agriculture labor work. They depend on landlord to get labor work. As agriculture mainly depends on rainfall, they have to migrate to other areas where industries are available during the time of drought or less rain, and also during the seasonal unemployment time. This is last when I was visit Cleveland IPM General Assembly. So that time I was speak about my voice, my story in my voice, because I am thank to IPM who they give this good opportunity to speak about my story in my voice. Thanks to IPM. Next. About Pochabhai. So Pochabhai is my father, and Joe, thanks to Joe, to today is next Sunday is a Father's Day, and I remembering my father. And Pochabhai was a good Dalit leader. Pochabhai was born on 23rd February 1951 in a Dalit family in Golana village. He spent his childhood in Golana village. During his childhood, he also became a victim of discrimination and exploitation by Darbar. He was feeling very bad when Darbar were exploiting Dalits. Seeing the condition of Dalits, he decided in mind, he went for further study at St. Xavier School, Anand. While he studied, he come in contact with missionaries priests. He got strength and spirit to fight against exploitation and injustice. Deciding to take movement against injustice, he came back to his community after finishing standard 10th study. He was the leader and motivator for all in the whole movement. Next slide, please. Introduction of Pochabhai Foundation. Pochabhai Foundation was born out of inspiration and motivation of Pochabhai, who was murdered by upper caste people 25th January 1986. It is a local level voluntary organization formed by like-minded individuals, professionals, and committed social workers. Daniben, she is my mother, and she is one of the founder member of Pochabhai Foundation, and she is our strength, and she gave this thought to start this movement. Who after my father's murder, so next slide, please. This is Peter. One minute, please. Yes. When Joe and his team visit Golana, so they visit hello.
We can hear you, Himmat. Carry on.
Yes. Next, please. So present activities under Pochabhai Foundation: education, school support program in 20 villages, 670 children, extra coaching class and life skill education, women farmer producer organization, 800 Dalit women from 27 villages have joined into agriculture cooperative to improve their livelihood status. Fight against injustice. We help the victim for legal and moral support, training and awareness on legal issues. Organic farming and kitchen garden. Organic farming started in 5 villages. 20 farmers have joined for organic certification process. Training and exposure organized for organic farming. Organic farming demonstration plot prepared. Extensive awareness raising program in 5 villages. Next, please. Liaison with government, Forest Department, Agriculture Department, District Rural Development Agency, National Medicine Plan Board, National Biodiversity Board. Partnership in GPDP program, village level planning for disaster management and help in planning and implementation. Celebration of Constitution Day. Regular celebration of Constitution Day on 26 November. The law of the Constitution gave the right of education. It gave protection to Dalit community against injustice. POCSO Act training for Balmitra. Environment awareness workshop, training workshop, exposure visit. Next, please.
Okay, I think I'll jump in. Himubai, we can't, your voice is dragging a bit, so it's difficult to make out. So I'll share the next 2 slides and let's see if you can connect again, yeah? I'm not sure if he's able to hear me. Can you hear me, Himmat?
POCSO Act training. It is very important to make the children and parents aware about this.
Ilsa, might I suggest that you mute Himmat as the meeting moderator, and I'll send him a chat. Mahesh can continue.
Sure, Joe.
Our apologies again, everyone. We thought we had this figured out, but the joys of technology.
It's just a low bandwidth here, Joe. So
Yeah.
sometimes the connection is going bad. So
Can you go ahead, Mahesh? Can you proceed? Is that possible?
you're able to hear me?
Yes, we hear you fine.
Okay, where did you lose him? Okay, yeah. So one of the activities that he's doing is working on the POSCO. So that's the Protection of Children from Sexual Offenses. It's an act which was introduced recently, and the government has been encouraging NGOs and lawyers to go around spreading information about the laws and heightening awareness about this issue. And this happens from village to village on a regular basis. He's basically listed out a couple of activities that have been going on. As you can see, there are many demands and many programs and projects that he's called upon for. And since it's a community-based organization, it takes a while to attend to all those needs. So environment awareness workshops, again, is a very important part of his work. I think I'd mentioned it on some previous occasions that he did a biodiversity survey in his neighborhood. So they went around all the villages, identifying all the flora and fauna, as they call it, all the plants, minerals, and herbs which are available in that area. There's some kind of mapping that they did, and they were recognized for their work. And so they conduct a series of workshops around that so that people understand what needs to be done with this rich biodiversity that they have, and also to protect it. The self-help groups, around 2,150 women have joined. There are around 118 self-help groups in 27 villages. The number keeps fluctuating between 2,000 and 3,000 because membership is renewed every year. So these are the current statistics, 2,150 women. 27 villages, and each of these villages have 2 women representatives. So there are more than 54 women leaders in these areas who contribute to the work that Pochabhai Foundation does. The next slide, please. Am I clear, Joe? Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
So can we see the next slide, please? Okay. So some of the other work that they are involved with. They have formed 27 youth groups of young men and women in 27 villages. They again have 350 youth. So this is basically their team, those 54 women-headed self-help groups, plus another 54 leaders from these villages who are youth leaders, men and women. So together he has a large team of more than 100 to 110 people, who are organizing, who are mobilizing in the area. Then you also have the Kutch Jet migrants. I think some of you have been there. These are the nomadic tribes which we spoke about earlier. So they live in the outskirts of around 7 villages in the area. They live around 4 kilometers away from Golana for the last 15 years, and they live in what is known as no man's land. They have no water, no electricity, no health facilities, no education. In fact, they are people without identities because they don't have what you call something like a social security number. something equivalent to that. So on paper, they don't exist. They're illegal immigrants from Afghanistan who came here maybe 70, 80 years ago. The other date that he has mentioned is 25th January. So that's the day when his father was murdered way back in 1986. Along with him, 5 others were also murdered. So even though this happened in 1986, I'd just like to go back for a minute to that slide when mention it, when he said my story in my voice. If you Google Golana, you will see more than 200, 300 articles, you don't have actually 300 articles on what happened in Golana, how people were killed. So this all stories about how the outsider came in and rescued these Dalits from exploitation and oppression. These are lawyers, these were non-profits, these were activists, these are filmmakers, but rarely ever did people from Golana get a chance to speak about their stories and their struggles. And I think IPM and Joe and I, we all contributed in some manner to that, because we feel that telling your own story is very important, because you reclaim your pride, you reclaim your struggles, and you're able to have a new generation of leaders who emerge from that. Otherwise they become unknown names, and it's always this outsider who comes and rescues people. But this was just to give you a brief background of the various activities that they have. Of late, COVID has impacted most of their work. But again, since they are member-based organization, all of the members are constantly on call or trying to demand different facilities from the government, and Pochabhai tries to facilitate that. Pochabhai Foundation has provided meals to more than 11,000 needy people in 3 talukas. So taluka is like a small sub-district unit. So they have provided cooked food to more than 11,000 people there. They also supplied 1,500 ration kits. Ration kits are packets consisting of rice, flour, soap, pulses, tea, sugar, oil, and like. Himmat is also called upon in some of the tribal belts in the south of Gujarat. Again, he's called upon there to identify herbs and help some of the tribals market some of these herbs, grow some of these herbs, and connect them to the state and the national markets. Homeopathy is very much in demand in our side of the world. It's low cost, and many medicines have been distributed during the COVID-19 phase, during the lockdown phase. They're supposed to be, they not only provide symptomatic relief, but they're also supposed to prevent COVID from happening. They're supposed to strengthen your defense systems. So what it does basically, all this alternative medicines that they use is help you deal with the COVID attack if and when it happens. It also provides for much needed psychological relief. So from a position of fear, people feel more confident in dealing with their lives. Again, he refers to the 150 kits distributed to the Jat Sindhi communities. They're again the nomadic tribe, the tribes that came from Afghanistan 70, 80 years ago before partition. They also provided dry snacks and cooked food to many migrant laborers. They also have facilitated transportation for many of the migrant workers. Very often at night, you would find a group of migrant workers settling down in the village, asking for food or wanting assistance because they were on their long walk back home. The next slide, please. Okay, this is again a photograph of cooked food being distributed to some of the children in the area. And the tuk-tuk that you see there transports the food. Food is basically a rice and lentil mixture with some vegetables in it and a little bit of oil. The next slide, please. Okay, this is again, it's a forest village. The area is known as Dediapada. The many tribals living there. They have more than 13, 14 dialects. They all speak different dialects. And most of them, because of scarcity of rain and scarcity of employment opportunities in the tribal belt, most of them move to the cities for construction. They work as construction labor. But because of the lockdown and this season, they've had to stay back at home. There's no income, very little food that they have in the village. They survive on minor forest produce since there's hardly any farming there. So here are a group of villages, and some of the parishes approached Himmat for assistance. This is again the distribution of food ration kit to the Sindhi communities, the Jat tribe that we mentioned earlier. Joe and Hank and many IPM visitors have been to this place. As you can see, there's an attempt to introduce physical distancing. Circles have been drawn, and even though there's not a large crowd there, this is a way of telling them how to interact whenever they are in other towns and villages, or whenever people come in for help. You need to organize yourself, stand at a distance, and you form the circles and wait there. These are those amazing women who do amazing handicraft. Again, this is another village in which you can see Himmat, who's not only distributing the ration kits, as he calls them, the food rations in Mainaj village, but also instructing them on what's happening in the outside world. What are the government schemes that one needs to access? How does one access them? And he's generally introducing not only himself, the organization's work, but also what they plan to do in the future, and telling them that this is not a short-term relationship, and that we'll be back to do more. The next slide, please. Again, when you see these migrant workers coming by, some families or some individuals have got together and they hastily prepared a meal, and you can see some of them on the floor at the back, sitting on the ground. So during the day and during the night, as you would see some of these migrant workers trekking 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 miles to their homes, to their villages, in Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, West Bengal, Maharashtra, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, which are all the states that they come from. Occasionally, they have tried to do what they could. The next slide, please. Okay. I understand Himmat is no longer on the call.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Now, these are again migrant laborers on the Khambat-Tarapur road. Now, Khambat and Tarapur, Khambat is in the Gulf of Cambay, as you saw in the map earlier. It's on the west-east coast, and Khambat is in borders Pakistan on the north, and Maharashtra on the south, and Madhya Pradesh on the east. Again, these are a group of tribal workers who are actually going back home. They have no jobs, they have no employment. This is the next slide, which shows them trying to reach home. These set of workers were working in factories which are nearby. They were educated maybe till 10th grade and 12th grade. They had some basic technical skills, and they are trying to reach home during the lockdown. So these are the people Himmat has often assisted with food, with transportation, and whatever they could. The next slide, please. Yeah, I think Himmat wanted to end by thanking you all for the support that you have given him. And here's something from a recent event that they had on Children's Day, and you can see the mothers at the back who were also celebrating International Women's Day. And yeah, they're holding an IPM banner. IPM is a connection to the world. They get to hear about the stories, about what's happening in the United States, in Latin America, in Africa. Very often, if you can, we share on Himmat and his team on their WhatsApp. Himmat is actually connecting through a WhatsApp, not through a cell phone, not through a laptop, because connections are bad. But on the cell phones, very often he shares stories about what's happening in the rest of the world, and they get to hear about it. So that's another way of educating them on not only about the coronavirus, but about the struggles going on in the United States, about the struggles going on in Latin America. They heard about Brazil last time. So every time there is a Friday sharing, Himmat goes back and shares it with his team. And the teams then share it with almost 50, 60 of their leaders, almost 104, but he managed to connect it maybe around 50 to 60 during COVID times. So I guess, that's it. If there's any questions, any queries or any clarifications, I can add to it.
Thank you so much, Mahesh, and thank you for trying again, Himmat. We're going back and forth on WhatsApp, seeing if we can get him reconnected. I realize this is frustrating for many of us. It's part of the challenge of the times in which we live, and I think in many ways a really important demonstration, even if one we don't enjoy, of how much access to appropriate bandwidth matters for people when they're trapped at home whether it's children in this country who aren't able to participate in online classes, or people around the world who are feeling increasingly isolated as the lockdowns continue and they're not able to be out and see the ones they love and go to the market and all the rest. So again, we're monitoring both on the Zoom and Facebook feed. So if you're on Zoom, please feel free to unmute yourself, wave as they say, and ask a question. And if you're on Facebook, please type it into the chat function there, and I'll relay it to the rest of the group. We have approximately 20 minutes for additional conversation, assuming you all want to go that long. So who has the first question or comment in relation to Himmat's prepared presentation and the words that he and Mahesh shared? Also, I don't know if that's you, but we're seeing the Zoom feed on the screen.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think that's Carol. I'm trying to disable that. Carol, if you could stop your screen share.
It's better to laugh. I'm on these calls all day, like all day, most days of the week, and it sort of becomes a comedy in errors. I just realized I haven't taken my bandana off from the hike this morning either, so I'm sorry if I look like Che Guevara, but that might be appropriate in this time. Who would like to ask a question? Let's see, I have one, I believe, here on Facebook. Mahesh, they're asking, not completely relevant, it's actually from a friend on WhatsApp. He's asking about the commemoration. He's British, let's leave it as anonymous as we can, and wasn't as aware of the Juneteenth commemoration in the US in the history of that. I know that you have expressed some parallels with what's happened in India, particularly with the Dalit community, around racial justice in the way color or colorism impacts people in India, in particular the Dalit community. Would you be willing to share a few thoughts about that?
Yeah, I just when we draw comparisons between racism in the United States and the caste system in India, I need to clarify that the caste system, first of all, is, though not based on color, it's based on a hierarchy of social status, and the caste is determined on the day you're born. The reason being that caste is, in one way, caste is also community in India. And caste is institutionalized class, if that makes any sense. So in some sense, if you are a landowner, your children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren continue to be landowners, not on the basis of individual property, but on the basis of your caste. If your parents are the Brahmin caste, for example, traditionally they were the knowledge givers, the people who researched, who taught religious books, science, health, all kinds of things. So they remained higher up on the caste hierarchy. After that, broadly speaking, you had the Kshatriyas, and you had the warrior class, and then you have the Vaishyas or the trading class, and then you have the Dalits, who could be broadly categorized as working class. But the thing is that you don't have a choice in this hierarchy of caste, because you're born that way. The reason being also, I mean, it's too complicated to explain in a few minutes, but the reason being that caste has been also sanctioned and institutionalized by religion in some ways, though originally they say it was not meant to be, but it has become institutionalized. And in some ways, even Karl Marx, when he spoke about Asia and he tried to apply his principles to our part of the world, he couldn't, and he called it the Asiatic mode of production, because he couldn't figure out how you could institutionalize class like this over a 5,000, 4,000 year period of time. So in terms of the kind of atrocities that go on, of course, there are. I just shared the other day with, I think, group members that the Supreme Court had to intervene in a case where a Dalit man wanted to marry a Dalit girl, and the family takes away the girl because she belongs to a different caste, and finally court intervention ensured that the marriage, they remain, they are with each other, and they remain with each other and remain married. There are regular cases of atrocities on them, from murders, from sexual exploitation, from sharing public resources. Even now, the village that Himmat comes from, every time we visit that village, there are 5 or 6 different wells. So each well each caste has an access to a particular well. So as long as you stick to your water well, you're okay. But if you try to take water from the neighboring well, then there's going to be a riot in the village. There's going to be violence there. Just to give an example of water. In schools also, I think they used to keep for a long time in Himmat's village separate drinking water pots, separate vessels. In the village, they still do. I'm talking about school, which is a public institution, or hospitals and colleges. Even of late, a couple of months ago, when a girl from his village was traveling in the bus, she was forced to get up from her seat. And the boy that she was traveling with, because they were lower caste and they had to offer their chairs to the upper caste boys. So there are these constant cases that you come across. The intensity varies from town to town, from village to village. There are streets where you have extreme caste exploitation going on. There are states where there is a lesser degree but more subtle caste exploitation going on. So it's a whole web. It's a complicated web, very difficult to sort of analyze. And the other problem that we have in the caste system is there's always somebody above you and somebody below you. Race is like a clear-cut polarization between the white and between the black, if you were to use these two kind of things. Caste, there's a hierarchy. So there's usually somebody above you and there's somebody below you. So the caste above you practices, discriminates against you, and you discriminate against the caste below you, So what Freire in Paulo Freire, those who are familiar with his pedagogy of the oppressed, he talks about the horizontal and the vertical systems of exploitation and consciousness. So very often what happens is that because you're not able to deal with the upper caste and the violence that a person who is working in an upper caste field, in the farm of an upper caste, when the man comes back home, very often he vents out his anger at the women in the family, for example. So domestic violence has been on the increase during COVID times in urban and rural homes, because both couples stay at home. So the worker who feels powerless on the farms and was unable to deal with the upper caste goes home and becomes this guy who beats up his wife because it makes him feel powerful. And sometimes he's actually venting his frustrations. He's not able to do it. Again, I'm putting all this very simplistically. It's more complicated. It's more complex. I'm just trying to give you a glimpse of what it means. I hope that helps.
No, I think that's hugely helpful. And I would point out that our colleague Alyssa Bobel recently posted a couple of really powerful reflections on the kind of violence that's being perpetrated in the home now around the world, with people at home. And particularly just yesterday heard a horrific statistic around the rates of teenage pregnancy, even younger than teenage pregnancy, in Machakos in Kenya, again with kids not in school and being out and about in the village. And so just a reminder, next week at 11, Teresa Matuku, who's the founder of our partner, the Kandula Community Development Project, will be speaking about our work in that part of Kenya. Many of you have traveled with me to Machakos. It's one of the most geographically or topographically the most beautiful places I've ever been on earth. But the situation there, and this recent posting from I guess a peer or colleague of Alyssa's about what's happening across Kenya to young girls who are out of school and in lockdown, is really quite horrific. And I know that Teresa would be willing to, address that if people have particular questions or want to know how to be further involved, as would Priscilla Nangarai, our longstanding partner with the Bride Rescue Project in Kajiado, who works with the Maasai, who I was in communication with overnight about a similar issue. Any other questions, folks?
So there's a couple on the chat. One from Marty asking, how is India doing in general in response to the COVID virus, and particularly how is the hospital capacity?
It depends. The hospital capacity varies from state to state. So there are many hospital beds empty in Ahmedabad, for example, but we have the highest fatality rate in our country right now. So I mean, we can't go by the standard statistics that we see in the United States. Each state in India is different. The capacities to deal with it are different, and the state governments are responsible for it. But if you look at the major centers like Bombay, which is a major city, Delhi, which is the capital, Ahmedabad, these are some of the major towns. So I think 60% of India's cases are from 6 or 7 major towns, cities, for example. So that's one. In the rural areas, comparatively, it is lesser. Again, I just wanted to share that in India, there are more people who die of tuberculosis than the total number of people who have died of COVID so far. So just to give you some examples of how we look at death here. And the hospitals, yes, but I don't think hospitals are going to play as big a role for us as much as community health workers and social workers and the others who are working at the cluster level. So home quarantine is very important for us. Contact tracing is very important for us. So immediately as soon as we hear somebody has been affected by it, they usually close the road, they block the residential quarters for a while. There are daily checkups. We just had 2 weeks ago, a neighbor of mine, just 4 homes away, had COVID, was detected with it. So for the next 2 weeks, we had health workers almost coming to our homes daily for a checkup. They would check our temperatures, they would check our, ask us if you have any health issues, diabetes, blood pressure, because my mom is both diabetic, high blood pressure, and a heart patient. So they would come regularly to do that. But then again, it depends on public cooperation. Some of them are cooperating, some of them are not. There are many people who think they're okay, and in fact, they might be carriers, they might be impacting us. So it depends. We have had lockdowns in different phases. We have opened up in many cities, and recently some of the cities have gone back to locking themselves. So Chennai, which is Madras, which is in the south of India, in Tamil Nadu, they've just announced a lockdown again because it has started spreading again. So that's the general scene. But as my friend Nachikota Moore shared a few days ago in an article, who's from my school but now works with the Gates Foundation and others, then in India and countries like us, community health and community health initiatives are more important than hospitals. Very few of them will be able to get to hospitals. There are many cities and towns where hospitals are miles and miles away. So a lot depends on what happens locally and what kind of initiatives are taken. How do you educate your neighbors? How do you educate your community, like Himmat has been doing in many of the villages that he goes to? All that is more important. And, I think we have reached a stage where I think it's not just about politics. It's also about what the citizens decide to do or not to do. I think in the first 3 months, certainly the government played a very important role. But I think today you and I also have to take a call on it, and we can't wait for some external agency or the cops to deal with it. In India, it was the police force that was dealing with it. Everywhere it was the policemen sort of enforcing lockdown and telling people what to do and what not to do. You need more health workers to do that. You can't criminalize this activity and catch people and fine them and lock them up and file cases against them all the time. You need to educate them too. So I think that's where we are comparatively. The cases, of course, are much more than what is being declared and what you see in the newspaper and in the media.
Thank you, Mahesh. There's another question from Carol Finling in a comment. How are the initiatives received by the landowners and those who depend on labor supply? And then she comments, living the dream of Jim and Paul. For those of you who don't know, Jim, one of our founders, Jim Mayer, lived in India with his family for 15 or 16 years, long before IPM even began, and that's where he encountered the not pleasant concept of RICE, R-I-C-E, Christians, and got much of his inspiration for the founding of IPM, and members of his family, both his children and nephews and nieces have traveled with us to India recently. But she said, living the dream of Jim and Paul, working with people where they are, using their gifts and aware of the culture, how small a world really is. That's for sure. I think we're all feeling that with Zoom and people all over the world on this call. But how are the initiatives, Himmat and Mahesh, received by the landowners and those who depend on the labor supply locally? I think Himmat's back with us. I don't know if he can.
Yeah. Himmat, can you say something?
Hello? No.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes.
Can you share about how the landlords are કેવી રીતે એ લોકો જોવે છે કહી શકો જમીનદારો?
Hello? Hello?
I think he's unable to hear us.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So I just quickly respond to it by saying that, see, this is, I think, for the first time in our all the crisis and all the pandemics and epidemics and all that we have been disasters that we have been dealing with. Somewhere COVID has also acted as a leveler in that sense, that everybody is scared of it equally, you know, the rich and the poor. So the amount of wealth you have, the amount of land you have is no guarantee that you will not get COVID. So somewhere that has certainly had an impact on many of them. There are many cases I know of both of landlords having shared the food and facilities that they have, but there are also cases where landlords have been exploiting some of the, I mean, I don't want to disrespect the women in many places that we are working with, but suffice to say that they're not exactly in a good place because just for survival, you have to exchange too many things, you know, your dignity very often. So there are such cases too in many places where you see that. But to a large extent, as far as labor is also concerned, they're worried because so many laborers have gone away, you know, so they're not here. Once things have started opening up, they see all the migrant laborers are gone. They're not in the neighborhood. So who's going to run the work on the farms? Who's going to construct the roads? Who's going to build the homes? You know, who's going to vend, and how are they going to recover the money? And there are all those kind of strains going on. So right now, comparatively, in Gujarat, in many places, they have shared food and tried to ensure that their laborers don't go starving, but not necessarily for their well-being. They're more concerned about themselves. But I think debt is going to go up drastically. They're not talking about it right now, but in the next, by the time things start opening up, we will know that many people have not been able to repay their debts to the private money lenders. So the government has announced a waiver of interest on loans, but these guys are not going to waive any of the interest on the money lending, on the loans that they've given to the poor. And they charge anywhere from 3% to 10% per day. So you can imagine how much that works out to a year. So for example, if I go and borrow $100 from a money lender, he gives me 90. He already deducts 10 from me as interest for a particular, the first month. You know? By the time, so if I'm not able to repay him, so you can imagine how much the compounded interest levels are going to go up. So that $100 loan might last a lifetime for some. And then you may have cases of bonded laborers going up, where the father is unable to repay the loan, so his sons and his family members provide free labor on the farms. We have had many such cases, as Himmat shares with us often, about people going into bondage and being in bonded laborers, sometimes across generation. It is illegal. Of course it is illegal. It's not legal, it's not lawful, but it's always happening. People are small farmers and people who have small land holdings might, because of this crisis, start doing distress sales of their lands, of their properties. So they will sell it at a lower cost just to survive. So these are some of the things which are generally happening. We have specific case studies which we can always share with you by email and others. But I just want to point out that the vision and the mission with which IPM has been founded still continues. And I believe that's the reason why accidentally people like Joe, I, Himmat, we all meet and get together by there's something up there, something out there which connects us. And then when we start talking, we discover we have the same ideologies, the same belief systems, similar values, similar concerns. So I don't know how that happens, but it happens. Sometimes we are so depressed with our struggles, with what is going on, and suddenly somebody out there makes these connections. And that has really sustained us more than anything else. And I think in some ways, today's sharing from Himmat and his previous sharings, unfortunately, he's not able to share so much because of the bandwidth connections. It's just amazing, just amazing. 10 years back when we were sitting with Himmat, he didn't see this organization. He was just this person sitting in a small house and talking to the Hathaway Brown students who had come on an immersion program. And I think the Hathaway Brown students were the first persons, young girls, to ask Himmat, Dani Ben, who are you? What is it that you do? And what do you really want? I think nobody asked them what they really wanted, the community and the villages. So dialogue, spending time, sharing space, listening, asking the right questions, such an important part of our work, such an important part of our work. And that's how it has expanded so much. And it's unbelievable what's happening in Golana and the surrounding 27 villages. It's community-led, community empowerment. Everybody has come there and gone. The church has come and gone. The non-profits have come and gone. And everybody had given up hope. I remember on the Martyrs' Day, the 25th of January, around 14 years ago, when I was the only person there when we were hoisting the flag. There was just nobody. There was me, Himmat, Ramesh, and 2 or 3 others. And Himmat and I were talking, and I said, no, let's keep the faith. Something will happen. Something will happen. There is a reason why it is taking us so much time. Maybe there's a reason why we have to go through all these trials and tribulations. And I said, all we can do, I remember telling Himmat, and sit and pray and remember his dad. And his dad never left us. If you visit his home, you constantly feel his spirit. And I would say, as long as his memory is alive, we are alive. That's what Himmat and I would say. And that belief, that system, so many years ago, has kept us through. And there is a saying in India, in our language, which says, Bhagwan ke ghar mein der hai, andher nahi. It sort of rhymes, der and andher. So which says that in the house of God, there might be a delay, but never darkness. And I'm trying to translate something which is very local, but it means that there can be a delay in God's home. Your prayers might not be answered today. Sometimes you have to wait for 10 years. Sometimes you have to wait 25 years. And the journey is part of the process and the part of what finally emerges and what happens. Who knows? Some donor would have come and given us some $100,000 or something, and we would not be doing this important work of listening to people. Nobody pays you money to talk to people and listen to them. They all want big projects. They want buildings. They want schools. They only want to hear sad stories. And I think Golana, Himmat, I, Joe, in various ways, all 3 of us 14 years back were in different places. And some amazing things have happened, which can't always be captured through a slide, through a projector, through a conversation. It's something that you feel, something that you experience. It has lasted. And I know people who have come way back in 2000. I'm sorry, I'm going on and on, but it's a pilgrimage for us to go to Golana and come back.
Thanks, Mahesh. I think that was a beautiful way to wind down our conversation, hearing the Juneteenth bells ringing 19 times in the church up the hill. The combination of that bell ringing and your final comments there were just beautiful and deeply moving. Next week, we are going to gather again at 11 o'clock. Our speaker will be Teresa Matuku, who's a graduate of Gregorian University in Rome. That's from where she holds her master's. That's how we initially met, through a professor who was a mentor to both of us and remains a dear friend of both of ours, even though he's pushing 90 in Nairobi right now. And we'll be hearing from her, speaking directly about her work with the Kandula Community Development Project. Over the past few years, IPM has partnered with that organization, not only in a micro enterprise project, sisal bag making, that some of you have seen in our office or photos of online, or if you've been with us to Kenya, but also in the building of a brand new school, K through 8 in her community, and a new playground that was just constructed just frankly this year. And we're looking at a lending library and some other interesting initiatives there. We have a couple of donors that I'll keep anonymous who are particularly passionate about the work of that community, and happy to support Teresa in her important work there. That will be at 11 o'clock. We'll be on Zoom and Facebook Live as well. And today at 2 o'clock, for those of you who have a facility in Spanish, 2 o'clock Eastern Time, we'll be continuing our speaker series with a virtual forum with Anita, correct, Ilsa? I just want to make sure.
Anita and Vicky both.
Anita Ramos and Vicky Jimenez, the two newest members of the IPM staff and the team in Latin America and Caribbean, who just spent 2 months, excuse me, in the Dominican Republic in lockdown and have recently returned to El Salvador. Vicky, some of you heard in the English Language Forum, is our coordinator for the Immersion Experience program. And Anita, who also presented on her experience in English, is the regional coordinator for our work with our project partners in Latin America and the Caribbean. Himmat, I want to take a moment to thank you again. I hope you can hear us or get my WhatsApp message. It was great to see you. And Mahesh, thank you for filling in and helping with the presentation today. And I hope that you all are able to get out and commemorate this Juneteenth celebration if you're in the United States, and celebrate Father's Day with those who you love as well, and in memory of those who have passed this weekend. May the peace that passes all understanding be with you all, and have a great rest of your day. Take care.